Losing my son Sammy has changed me. I watched my coworkers do compressions on him. I wasn't a drinker, and here I am drinking during the day to function, turning into a zombie. I was having nightmares and dreams. I've bounced from job to job, and my marriage to my wife, it has suffered. I just needed to feel safe, like cuddle up into a little ball and just feel safe. I just was not handling life well. But that's part of the storm grief unleashed on me. The weather is unpredictable. The waves of agony, massive. I drowned. I came up for air. I'm in it, and I'm steering the ship the best I can. First, if you're new to this channel, it was created in the wake of the loss of my son. Sammy passed away unexpectedly, suddenly. He had a bit of a struggle before he eventually passed. But he passed a month before he turned 13. A little bit about Sammy. He was born with something called 1p36 deletion syndrome. He had some developmental delays. Mostly nonverbal. He could communicate and could understand. He just mostly was nonverbal. He said things like "pod."
Yeah, buddy. Good job, dude.
And he had a really bad heart, a weak heart, but he thrived. Long story short, he didn't look like a child with as weak of a heart as he had. He was given too many fluids. His heart couldn't handle it, and it stopped twice. They brought him back twice. But the compressions, how long it took, he ended up dying 19 days later in an ICU in New York City, and a really brutal 19 days. And he really suffered, and he really struggled. And his mother and I were with him the whole time, and yeah. So the first thing I want to talk about is career. And I did journalism for about maybe 15 years. Loved being a journalist. I've always loved to write. But then, my son Sammy changed all of that. I would be with my son in and out of the hospital. I noticed when I was in the hospital that even though his prognosis didn't change, that depending on the bedside manner of the doctor, the nurse, the tech, the aide, whoever, it just helped so much. It lifted spirits. You know, it was touching. And I know that goes a long way here. Positive attitude, how you feel, that goes a long way with healing. And I wanted to do that for people. I got out of journalism and I got into healthcare. I went back to school. My last job in healthcare was as a critical care tech in an ICU, and I did all sorts of jobs like CNA type stuff, nurse assistant stuff like bathing patients, walking them, helping them exercise, drawing blood, doing EKGs. I was part of the code team, so my job was mainly compressions or to draw blood during codes. Loved being able to give back and help others in the way they helped me. And I was really good at it. I had a lot of empathy and patience, I think, because I know what it's like to be on the other side, you know. But then it happened. I watched my coworkers do compressions on him. I watched all that. Those images are permanently ingrained in my mind. You know, my friends, my coworkers, compressing my son's chest, putting in a tube for breathing. The next 19 days in the ICU in New York City, he was on a ventilator for parts of it, and I would care for patients on ventilators. And I just saw those things I saw. Even though it was always hard, this was a different type of hard. It was my son, and I just couldn't. I had PTSD. I had to leave that job. So I got back into journalism. Well, that was short-lived. It was just too soon. I had to go to school sometimes to do interviews or stories, and I was having panic attacks. I'd find myself around, say children that were Sammy's age. It just was too soon. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't be at work. I was starting to become a zombie. It was too soon. My son had just died, and I took a little time off, but you can only take so much time off, right? The bereavement, it's ridiculous, this country, the system, what they expect of people. I wasn't a drinker, and here I am drinking during the day to function, taking sips out of a flask, turning into a zombie. I was having nightmares and dreams about Sammy in the ICU, about his suffering. I was a mess. I didn't know if I wanted to be here anymore. I just needed to feel safe, like cuddle up into a little ball and just feel safe. I just was not handling life well. I didn't work for a little while. I escaped to the mountains of Vermont where I grew up, moved in with my brother, and eventually got a part-time job stocking shelves at a convenience store within walking distance, but that didn't last. I ended up moving from my brother's to another part of Vermont, a close friend who's like a brother. And I worked with these people that lived next door, like helping them process their flowers. They grew flowers that they sell around the world. This family that years before had come to America from Venezuela embraced me. I'd pick flowers in these sprawling gardens, so calming, grounding, nourishing. My hands in the dirt, all these colors that I felt my beautiful boy in as I helped clean flowers up, prepare them to be turned into beautiful bouquets that would eventually be part of helping someone's heart smile, like this work that was making my heart smile. Felt like, maybe I can re-enter society again. So I got a job as a bartender. It was always on my bucket list. Worked as a bartender for a while and a bar manager. Did that for like a year and a half. I was working like 8 hours a week. I enjoyed it. Eventually that got to be too much too. I returned to the Adirondacks and moved back in with my wife, Sammy's stepmom. When Sammy was alive, his biological mama and I split custody 50-50. He'd live a week with her and her place, which was just up the road from us, and then a week with me and his stepmom, Priscilla. Worked seasonal as a FedEx packager, loading trucks. I tried to get back into healthcare. I knew I couldn't work in a hospital again, but I thought, well, maybe I can work in a nursing home. So I got my CNA certification again. I did like that. I liked being back in healthcare. It was hard though too, and it ended up hurting my back, and I got out of that. I tried to work at a store, but life is short, and I'm carrying around this grief all the time. What do I really want to do? Honestly, I'm making these videos. I am writing a blog. I am working on a memoir. I am re-editing a novel that I had written. I'm trying to create something, a way that I can support myself, doing creative work that I enjoy. I just carry around this sadness, and it's hard for me now not to do stuff I enjoy. But my point is, to mentioning the career stuff, is that it's been sporadic. I've bounced from job to job, and I just know I'm doing the best I can, but that has definitely changed a lot since grieving. My career, if you looked at it, the outsider looking at it would say, very unstable. Relationship. My marriage to my wife, it has suffered, and we love each other, but I left. Honestly, I didn't know if I might kill myself, so I made choices that were best for me so I could live. And my wife has been very supportive, very understanding, but that also meant I left her. And I did. I was gone for 3.5 years, 3 years. And no matter how supportive she is, that's going to impact you. It's going to impact your relationship. And I got to live with it. I think two things can be true. Even though I made the best choices I could make, I know also, and that it has hurt her, and that our relationship has suffered as a result. I mean, she lost her stepson that she cared for 3.5 years, lost this family unit we had, all of a sudden all of that changed. And she's left grieving on her own, so while she supported me, doesn't mean she's not struggling and suffering, and it doesn't mean none of that had an impact. This thing happened to us that was beyond our control, and now we're trying to pick up the pieces. This has impacted other relationships in my life. Some relationships just didn't stay together. People started avoiding me. I think it was just hard for them. How do they navigate this? Some of the choices I made angered people, and that's okay, even though I feel like I'm doing the best I can. You know, they're allowed to have their own feelings, their own opinions about it, and that ended up ruining some friendships. Some people I stepped away from. I realized that the friendships weren't as substantial as I thought they were, weren't as meaningful as I thought they were.
Walking away from someone is hard, but I've learned since losing my son that boundaries are more important than ever. And just because we walk away from each other now doesn't mean one day we won't be walking toward each other again, part of each other's lives again.
I've become more impulsive, but sometimes, depending on how much this grief is consuming me, has got a hold of me, especially right after my son passed. Nothing felt good, and so maybe I was impulsive and engaged in self-soothing things, or things to feel good that weren't really healthy for me. You know, maybe they were bad coping skills, not bad, unhealthy coping skills that I thought I had worked through, but that came back. Or maybe new ones I found just because I was so desperate to feel good.
I was never taught how to cope with, how to process grief, trauma. Many of us have been neglected in this way. Tragedy strikes and you're flailing, grasping for something, anything to numb the pain. Unhealthy activities, or maybe activities that aren't necessarily unhealthy, but are harmful in the way you employ them. I've harmed myself with substances, sex, food. What feels good in the moment isn't always helping you.
Since my son Sammy died, I always carry this undercurrent of grief, of sadness, of longing to hike with my son again, to kayak with him, to cuddle with him at night, to be with him, to hear him say, "Pa." That undercurrent, that crashing wave, that sadness. And it is a crushing sadness to not have your child. I'm never going to stop missing my son, and I am always going to grieve him, and sometimes it grabs right a hold of me, especially if I'm not paying attention to my body and doing what I need to do. But even if I do what I need to do, exercise, seek out things that fill me with joy, my son is gone. I no longer have that access to him, and it's part of grieving, and it's something I need to go through and process, right? And again, I am carrying around the images I saw, how my son's suffering, my son not being here anymore, my child gone from me. That is a devastating weight to carry around. I do have a tendency to self-isolate. Protective mechanism, I don't know, trust issues, but I can self-isolate and not take the help that's put out there for me that would definitely be helpful sometimes. It's not that I've turned my back on society. Part of it is trust issues from past trauma. Part of it is also that I feel the impatience of many people in my life for me to move on, stop making them feel uncomfortable. But grief is lifelong. I have been moving on, recreating myself, experiencing joy, but I also miss my son, Sammy. It's not their fault. They've been reared in a society that neglected to show them how to support people who are grieving, how to show up with empathy, and that, yeah, joy, positivity, that's all great, but it doesn't mean we stuff away sadness, cry in the shadows. There have been some beautiful beings who have showed up with open arms and the ability to sit with me in my grief. But this is my journey, and it's safer to rely on myself. But I feel alone a lot too. And as I edit this, I'm reminding myself to get over myself and get better at accepting the help I at times
desperately need.